Hello and welcome to the Embodied Psyche. My name is Hannah Bernstein, and I'm thrilled to be here today with Dr. Wendy Harris. Dr. Harris was my professor at Antioch University. She's the creator and director of the Addiction Specializations program there at Antioch University. She also acts as a lead facilitator with Gabor Mate's process Compassionate Inquiry, and also facilitates and trains internationally in the Beyond Addiction program. Welcome, Wendy. It's so good to have you here.
Thanks for inviting me. I'm happy to be here.
Did I miss any of the beats in your extensive work? I feel like there's so many things that you do.
Those are the key points.
Yeah, it's a fascinating body of work, and it definitely incorporates that mind-body connection that I think is so important as the field of therapy is expanding to incorporate all of these things that are clearly part of the healing process. I'm curious, in your own life, in your own experience, how did you first come to understand that sort of mind-body approach to wellness?
Oh, wow. What a great question. I would say it probably began really when I discovered Kundalini yoga. And it's been 20 years. And, at the time, I just found it to be a necessary way of creating balance in my life. I was getting clean and sober at the time, and it wasn't enough for me to just sit in meetings and have the understanding of recovery and doing a 12-step program. So there was something about moving and healing the body that was an important part of that process.
I really appreciate you being willing to talk about that, both the recovery process and what acts as kind of like an addendum to it. I know a lot of people, even people who found deep relief with something like Alcoholics Anonymous, sometimes feel like there's an additional something missing. For you, how did Kundalini yoga and movement start to address that limitation?
Well, as I was answering the question, something else was going on too. I had a car accident, and it was definitely a pivotal, life-changing moment where I was T-boned by a cement mixer, if you can imagine that. And so I had just finished my first master's degree, and I had such severe closed head trauma that I couldn't read or write anymore. And I didn't know, do you stop at a red light or do you go at a red light? And, things were just really not connecting. And so my Kundalini yoga practice was so instrumental in just listening and following directions and really integrating what I was hearing with movement. And I realized, that I was actually creating new neural pathways and helping to balance the brain, because I had done like 7 360s through an intersection. And so everything, it was like I couldn't stop the spinning. So there was something about the grounding practice and the breathing that really got me into my body and got the healing process underway.
Wow, that's so fascinating. I never knew that kind of traumatic injury was part of your history. Have you had a complete recovery from that, or do you suffer with any of the lingering symptoms?
I would like to think so. I remember when it happened, prior to the head injury, I had a photographic memory. I never had to write anything down, and I was just like so on point all the time. And after it happened, I remember my mom saying, oh, well, now you're just like all the rest of us. I'm like, but you don't understand. So there's definitely been a lot. I can read and write now, obviously. I don't think that I have any of the lingering negative side effects, but part of the process is that it actually catapulted me into being more intuitive. So whereas before I had been so in my head and so analytical, there was something that brought me into my heart, and I became more of a feeling, intuiting person as well. So there was this co-evolution that was going on.
I love hearing that. And it's interesting. It's been a little bit of a theme as I've done these interviews, that for many people, an awakening into an understanding of the importance of the body did happen through physical trauma. And I'm thinking now of a Jung quote, something like, "We never get to reach heaven unless we understand the depths of hell." I'm butchering it slightly. But for me, that's been an important kind of touchstone as I've confronted trauma in my own past, that sometimes we get this really rich understanding only by seeing the ways that the system kind of breaks down.
Completely. That must explain my heavenliness. There's been a lot of hell.
Well, yes. And it's funny, but I also think it is true. I mean, you've turned this scary moment, and also I imagine some of that addiction history, into a deep understanding of how to help people who are still stuck in either pain physically or pain from addiction, to help them move forward in their lives. What have you seen change either in the lives of your clients or your students?
You know, I really think about how much my training with Gabor Mate has changed my own perspective and beliefs, and how I take that into the classroom with students and with the work I do with my clients. And the main thing being that it helps, I think, to destigmatize addiction if we understand that at the root of all addiction is pain, and that pain is associated most often with some sort of trauma, whether it's like a big T trauma or that more insidious relational trauma. So, you know, instead of that judgy way that sometimes people think about someone who's addicted, that if we take a step back and really are curious and want to understand what is the pain, what is the trauma at the root cause, and that the addiction is really just our best attempts at relieving our suffering, even if just for a minute. And it's like, who wants to suffer? Who wants to be in pain? Like, I'm going to reach for whatever I can for some relief.
Yeah. Gabor Mate kind of famously has openly been trying to popularize the benefits of things like plant medicine as alternative treatments for healing addiction. What are your thoughts on these newer modalities of treatment?
I definitely would advocate for it, but not across the board. So, something that I really stand by is that there's not a one size fits all approach. And so whereas plant medicine can be really, really helpful for some people, and be really instrumental and pivotal even in their recovery, there are other people that it would be completely counterindicated for. So I think before a person goes in that direction, it's important to really research, know who you're going to be sitting with, and what is the medicine, the plant medicine that you're working with, to have an intention that you're working with, to have integration support on the other side of it, and that it's definitely not for everybody, and it's not like a magic pill, so to speak, that's going to just solve everything.
I appreciate you addressing that, because I think some people are looking at it a little bit that way, as kind of a magic bullet for fixing things with less side effects than, say, antidepressants. And I'm realizing also that I misspoke in asking the question, because I called it a newer modality, but in a certain sense, it's like one of the oldest modalities for trauma healing.
It's so true. And you know what, since you brought up antidepressants, one of the benefits is that whereas a person might have to take 30 days, 6 weeks to titrate up with a pharmaceutical like Zoloft or Prozac or whatever they're prescribing these days, one of the benefits is that if someone is, if they're using, it could be ketamine, although that's not a plant medicine, but it is a psychedelic that's being used as an intervention, an MDMA, but with ayahuasca and psilocybin, it can cause a really quick increase in serotonin. So a person doesn't have to wait weeks and weeks and weeks and weeks to see if their psychotropic pharmaceutical is going to work or not. So for people that have been suffering with chronic depression or, suicidality, that increase, that pretty rapid increase that can occur from like the first day to like within the first week and last for a bit can bring a great amount of relief in a short period of time to someone who's been suffering for a while.
Yes. And as you mentioned, compassionate integration is essential to the process. Can you talk a little bit about this method you've been helping Gabor Mate to facilitate, the compassionate inquiry technique?
Yeah, so Compassionate Inquiry, we launched the program in January 2019. And the belief, I guess kind of the tagline to it is that we're really looking at the subconscious beliefs and patterns that are beneath the surface and impacting our lives. And so this helps to get, again, to the root cause. And there's a somatic piece to it. It integrates Richard Schwartz's work with internal family systems. So it's a really, really integrated approach. I see, CBT coming through in it as well. And at the foundation of the process is safety. Now, it's so important that the participant or the client feels safe enough to do the work. And once they have that safety, then it opens them to the vulnerability where the real healing can occur. So our process is, it's a series of stepping stones that just takes a person kind of deeper, beginning with a trigger and something that's happening in the here and now, which is more like the tip of the iceberg. We know like only a piece of it is about what's happening in the here and now. It's just triggered an old wound.
Yeah, I'm flashing back mentally on some demonstrations when I was in one of your courses at Antioch, where we would do kind of like mock therapy, but often people would bring to it their own personal memories and personal histories. And you would see someone who was having a feeling in the present, realize they'd had it, say, when they were in elementary school at hockey practice or something. And it was really fascinating to see how quickly these bigger things would come to the fore. Kind of a more rapid method than I've seen with other kinds of psychotherapy.
Yeah. It's super fast. I mean, it can be very brief. Something Gabor says is that our goal should be to get fired by the client as soon as possible. So it's not like, years and years of analysis. It's a really fast approach. And, the somatic piece is, based on the understanding that the trauma is stored in the body. And so when we invite the client into the body, like, what is it that you're feeling in your body? Is there any tension right now? And let's give that tension some of our attention. And then it becomes like the portal, the gateway into the trauma oftentimes. It's like, oh, is this a familiar feeling? Have you felt like this before? And as soon as someone goes, like if they're doing like the high school memory, it's like, great, we can totally work with that. But when they are able to say, oh, yeah, like I remember when I was 5, I remember when I was 3, and I'm like, yes, jackpot. We have gone to like potentially the source of when this core belief was really forming. There was like this thing that happened, which is like the first trauma. And then the next question is, well, who did you talk to? So say a kid has just been bullied at school. Yeah, that's traumatic. That's terrible. It's painful. But the next trauma is if they came home and they had no one to tell. So who did you talk to? I didn't talk to anybody. And I would say 9 times out of 10, when I ask that question, who did you tell? I get the same answer, nobody. Well, why not? I'm curious, why didn't you tell your mom and dad? Why didn't you talk to anybody? And so we're just opening and going so much deeper with each of these stepping stones. It's like, oh, well, I didn't talk to my parents because, and it just speaks volumes, the reason why. They were too busy. They weren't there. Dad was a drunk. Mom couldn't handle it. Like any number of things are revealed in that that part of the inquiry.
Absolutely. Yeah, I appreciate you bringing that up. And I appreciate also that you have this foundational practice of the Kundalini yoga, as you mentioned, that kind of has given you this skill set of like really powerful meditative calm that you can kind of like lean on throughout these deep inquiries. I guess I'm a little bit curious for people, I'm thinking even of my own process in healing. That point you touched upon, not having someone to turn to when something bad happens, is often true for children and tragic. But then in adult life, there can be isolation too in our modern world, and especially with the pandemic.
Exactly.
So how do you recommend that as people are delving into healing these traumatic wounds, they also are building a foundation where they have either a personal practice they can lean on or interpersonal relationships that have a little bit more of that safety?
Well, for the first thing before I answer that question is what you just touched upon is why the pandemic and the isolation is especially difficult for many people, because it's actually a re-traumatization. So if they were a child who had no one to talk to, and then they're suddenly at home alone in their apartments during the pandemic, and then if you look at people who are in recovery that are used to going to their 12-step meetings and having the fellowship, and I get that there's a lot of stuff going on via Zoom right now, but it's not the same. The physical contact, that interaction, whether it's, having the coffee or hanging out afterwards. So that's why I think this is the pandemic and the isolation piece is even more intense for some people than others. They're the people that actually already had that trauma of isolation and no one to talk to. And then they find themselves in the same situation. It's like, wow, there's something really familiar about this. Oh yeah. When I was a little girl, I was all alone by myself with all of these feelings, fear, sadness, anger, and no one to talk to.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, definitely I can relate to that. That's come up for me during this time, certainly.
Oh yeah. And for all of my therapist friends that are, many are single women who live alone, who are holding space for so many people. And then at the end of the day, they're exhausted. And a lot of the outlets that we would have for self-care, whether it's getting a massage or meeting friends, for a meal or taking a yoga class and connecting in community, like gone. So it's like, wow, another thing Gabor says is that we, as the therapists, we are the shock absorbers for society. So here we are absorbing all of the shock, holding all of this. And at a time when our self-care ideally would be, increased, there's like an absence of resources and accessibility.
Yeah. So I guess partially I asked just for my own edification, because I have been struggling with that balance and honestly finding myself kind of like leaning on what I think of as like my milder vices. So I don't go to like the bigger.
Right. Yeah. And who can blame anybody who's relapsing or, using food or online shopping or it's like sugar, whatever. It's like, listen, let's just all get through this. Let's all just get through this the best we can. There's no need to judge. Let's be compassionate with ourselves and each other.
Well, I like the gentleness of your response. I like that you, instead of just jumping to like, do this, do that, talked about the reality of the problem, because you're right. While the ideal might be like waking up at dawn and meditating.
Right.
Like maybe the reality is like a lot of us are turning to, some forms of soothing that just give us like temporary comfort while we're in a pretty intense.
Exactly. Let's all just get through this the best we can, Yeah. In fact, I've been thinking a lot lately, and I don't know how it's going to come into form, but I've been thinking that when this is over, I want to create a space, a retreat, a healing retreat that's like to heal the healers. So all of the space holders, all of the people, because like we're in the trauma. There's no PTSD yet. PTSD happens on the other side. So to create like a really nourishing and nurturing space for therapists, for frontline workers, for everyone who's holding it together to come and heal together in community on the other side.
I love that. That's beautiful. Yeah. And I think, honestly, with that somatic piece, we're probably going to need some touch rehabilitation with all of this fear of contagions and stuff.
Right? Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. I'm curious about whether you might be willing to share an exercise with our audience, something to help them kind of work on that parasympathetic nervous system re-regulation.
Oh my gosh, that's like one of my favorite things to do. I mean, I love polyvagal theory, and so what I'll teach you all, and we can do together. Do we have like 3 minutes, and I'll actually lead it?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
It's called left nostril breathing, and so by breathing in and out through the left nostril, it stimulates the parasympathetic nervous system. So the parasympathetic nervous system is our body's innate ability to calm itself down, to slow itself down. Now, if we were to do right nostril breathing, it does the exact opposite. It stimulates the sympathetic nervous system. So I think of sympathetic nervous system like the green light, and the parasympathetic is like the red light or the yellow light, like slow down and stop. And, you know, when we live in a city like Los Angeles, it's very sympathetic dominant. The second you get in your car and enter into traffic, that the momentum and that energy is just like go, 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 go. And then when we're using stimulants like caffeine to keep going, that's all sympathetic dominant. So the majority of people already have the sympathetic nervous system very, very strong and active. So what we want to do is now strengthen the parasympathetic, which is strengthening our ability to relax, to calm ourselves down. And so this is great to do in the evening before you go to bed, just 3 minutes before bed. If you're transitioning kind of into your home from driving somewhere, back in the day when we used to go to campus, you know, if you've just been through traffic and you're going in for class, you could sit in your car and do 3 minutes of left nostril breathing. It just helps to ground and calm and center and activate the parasympathetic. Okay, so let me start my timer. And so what we're going to do is we will take the right thumb of the right hand and close the right nostril. And if you feel comfortable closing your eyes, you can close your eyes. I like to close mine. And begin to inhale long and deep through the left nostril. And then briefly suspend the breath and exhale. So we're inhaling and exhaling long and deep through only the left nostril. And just breathe as deeply and completely as you can, filling the lungs, relaxing the belly, just allowing your whole body to expand on the inhale. And as you exhale, just release, empty, let go. And while we're doing this, another way to strengthen the parasympathetic nervous system is by having a longer exhale than the inhale. So you could inhale to the count of 4. Inhale, 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 inhale. And exhale to the count of 6. Exhale, 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 exhale. Inhale, 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 inhale. Exhale, 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 exhale. And if that pace or that count stresses you out or doesn't work for you, just make it your own. Just make it your own. So a little less than a minute to go, about 45 seconds. Just allow yourself to breathe more deeply. Exhale more completely. Just notice if there's any tension in the body. Just relaxing your jaw, your shoulders. And after this next exhale, just gently release your hand down. And take a moment to center yourself. Inhaling deeply. Exhale, letting go. And as you're ready, open your eyes.
Thank you so much, Wendy.
Yeah, you're welcome. My pleasure.
I'm remembering you taught this exercise when I was a graduate student. And at that time in my life, for whatever reason, I could not breathe out of my left nostril. It was kind of like chronically sinus clogged.
Wow. So that's going to keep you like sympathetic dominant all the time.
Right. Wow. And I hadn't even been aware of it. I was pretty disembodied. So it's possible I just spent years of my life totally living in my sympathetic nervous system. But I worked with this exercise, and I'm glad to say that today I'm in a place where when I go to this exercise, there's no congestion in my way.
Wow. Yay. Oh, I love that. I love that.
So yeah, I found this pretty transformative, and I would turn to it in moments of like acute stress or when I just wanted to wind down a little bit. I found it really re-regulating, and I'm grateful for it, and grateful this audience can share in that too.
Yeah. No, it's so simple. Like you don't need anything, just your hands, and something that we believe in the yogic tradition is that when you can control your breath, like we do in any of these pranayams, when you can control your breath, you can control your mind. And when you can control your mind, you can control your emotions. The entry point is through the breath.
Wow. Well, I would just love to give you some time because you're in so many worlds. You just spoke at the Embodiment Conference. Obviously, you're doing this important work with Gabor. You're doing the Beyond Addiction work. What is lighting you up? What's sparking you these days? What would you like to talk about?
Ooh, that's a great question. Really, what's sparking me and lighting me up? I just moved to Santa Fe, New Mexico. And it has been like just so amazing getting out in nature. And, something we say in the Compassionate Inquiry program is like, how do you take 100% responsibility? Right? And what is the most compassionate thing you can do for yourself? And so as, the lockdown was ongoing and I was learning that I would be able to work remote longer and longer and longer, I realized, gosh, I've been in LA for 20 years and it's time for a change. I'm ready for a change. So it's really just exciting to me. I'm spending a lot of time in nature. I've got 2 dogs, so lots of walks. And it's a really great balance because my screen time is like ridiculous. I'm on Zoom all day long, doing individual sessions. facilitating the CI groups, and then the courses I teach at Antioch. So yeah, what really excites me these days is I'm learning to do a whole lot less and be a lot more. And so it's been, I teach a lot about self-care. And so it's been cooking really nourishing, nurturing meals for myself. Yeah, so that's what's got me really excited. Yeah.
I love that.
Oh, and you know what? There's something else. This actually really excites me. So I have a guitar, and I have been learning. Well, I'm like okay with playing the guitar, but I'm starting to like sing and learn Portuguese and some of the songs from like plant medicine work. So I just get so immersed in, coordinating my fingers, learning this language that's sort of like Spanish, which I know, but actually like different enough. So that's what I'm doing. That makes me very excited is this new language with the guitar and singing. So I've just like taken, I think like COVID, like quarantine and the isolation to a whole new level. Yeah.
Well, that's amazing.
I'm into it. Yeah. What's that?
I find it pretty inspiring. I mean, so you touched upon like, okay, so for some people, like loneliness might be harder than others. And I think I'm one of those people, but it's been kind of a masterclass in confronting those triggers. It's like, okay, some people make friends with isolation. How can I also enjoy this time as an extrovert in my ordinary life? So yeah, music has been a part of that for me too. And I'm glad to hear that you're spending all this time in nature and getting to commune with things that are enjoyable for you too. Yeah. Thank you. Well, I really appreciate you taking the time to talk with us and to share your work. I'll link below to Beyond Addiction. So that's the recovery path that explicitly includes the power of yoga and movement. And also your work with Gabor Mate, Compassionate Inquiry, and your website, yogiwendy.com.
Oh, actually, I have a new website. It's drwendyharris.com.
Okay. Dr. Wendy Harris.
Yeah, DR. Yeah.
Thank you so much for sharing. All right. Well, I wish you well. I'll let you get off the screen and back to your life in Santa Fe.
All right. Thank you. Nice to see you.
Nice to see you too.